Welcome to the ReUp Men's Podcast with Tim Brown. I'm Brandon Porter. Thanks for joining us. ReUp is here to help men be the man God created them to be. You can learn more about ReUp and the ministry we have here at our website, which is reuppodcast.com. Tim, it is a fun thing to teach someone a new skill, a new talent. So often we tend to take things for granted. I think it's so fun to teach a youngster how to ride a bike or how to throw a baseball, something like that. That just brings a lot of joy to our lives, doesn't it, to teach that new skill?
Yeah, it does. I've got a 9-year-old grandson who, up until just about 6 months ago, showed no interest in anything but tractors and trucks and farm equipment and all that. But now he's fallen in love with baseball. And so being able to watch him and actually participate a little bit in helping him learn how to throw and catch and hit, all that, yeah, it's kind of fun. Of course, the older I get, the more of a expert I am on things like that. I can tell him how good I used to be and that he needs to follow my instructions, because I was so good back then. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
funny joke. The field he played on this year was the same field I played on 50 years ago.
Wow.
Um, and I hit the very first home run at that park. It was brand new, and we had the first game that night, and I hit the home run and all that. But the only thing that he commented, I thought he'd say, "Wow, that's awesome," whatever. He said, "So, Papa, you're actually old as the dirt that's over there." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's right, I am."
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, there we
Yeah.
go. But yeah, it's
Help you
been a lot of
humble.
fun. Yeah, been
Yeah.
a lot of fun
Yeah,
to watch
definitely
him
there.
learn and learn that skill and those fundamentals and all that. So yeah, it's always fun to watch anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you say that. The more that we teach others, I think the more we're reminded that the fundamentals are what's so important. And we can teach it a higher level of skill once we get there. But if you don't build that foundation, if you don't build those fundamentals, then you're never going to get to a higher level of skill.
No doubt. And obviously, that's one of the things we've tried to do with this man journey model that we've created, and then with the new book that just been released, is really get guys back to the fundamentals of being able to answer that question, what is a biblical man, and taking those three truths. If you listen to the last episode, taking those three truths that we're trying to get men to really learn and live in and embrace and understand, they're the fundamentals. They're the foundation that everything else is built off of. I mean, you can't learn how to throw a curveball until you got the fundamental of a fastball down. You got to get
Yeah,
that
that's
down
right.
first before you throw a breaking ball or whatever. So really, for other things to happen in your life in manhood and your role as a man or whatever, this fundamental foundation based on truth of what a biblical man is, then everything kind of ripples from that. But
Hmm.
you got to get that fundamentally, those truths fundamentally ingrained in your life.
Yeah. Do you see Christian men regularly raising up younger men on how
Mm.
to be Christian men? I mean, whether it's a father or a grandfather, or even in the context of a local church.
Yeah, I don't want to be. I don't want to always be, the Donnie Downer here, and the
Mhm.
guy that beats everybody up and makes them feel bad. But it's not happening. I mean, if it
Mhm.
was, we'd see some things be a little different in some aspects of culture. But as we talked about in the last episode, I mean, what we were called to do is make disciples, and there's just not a lot of that going on. Recently, I was at a church in Arkansas, and a young man came up to me after the event we did, and he said, "Why do you think men are not, older men especially, are not training up younger men? How come we're not doing that? How come the church isn't doing that?" Man, I said, number one, you and I don't have enough time to kind of break that down and unpack it. But yeah, I think a lack of confidence, a lack of feeling like we're equipped, and I mentioned in the last episode too, a lot of those things are driven by fear. We don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we can't answer somebody's question, or we don't really feel like we've got something to offer or to pass on to them. And so we're just not doing that. And I challenge guys a lot with this question. I say, hey, there's 20 guys in a room or whatever. Of you 20 guys, how many of you, if I ask you to raise your hand, are consistently putting yourself in an environment where you're either being invested in by somebody older, or you're older and you're investing in somebody and you're doing that weekly, monthly, in some kind of consistent rhythm? How many of you are doing that? I mean, if it's 20 guys there, if I get one or two to raise your hand, well, I mean, we
Mhm,
celebrate that. That's a good
mhm,
night, because it's just not happening.
mhm.
Again, I hate to be critical and condemning at all, but I mean, we just got to be truthful. We're just not
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah, but I think we also need to recognize that there's not just a void in this area in the world around us, that there are those who are pursuing young men and trying to ingrain value and purpose and identity and
Absolutely.
direction into them. And we have to
Absolutely.
be mindful that there, even if we're not playing the game, there is still competition for the attention of that younger generation.
Yeah. I mean, there's a quote that a young man who actually grew up around me when my boys were little, and he's now a pastor of a very large church here in the United States, and one of the larger ones in the country. And he just says, if if you're not going to disciple the next generations, they're being discipled by somebody, and most of the time they're being discipled by things that aren't good. So that's happening around us all the time, but it's just a matter of who's doing it, and is it being done by the world, or is it being done by a godly man who's got a heart to invest in other young men?
Yeah. Yeah. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." When you think about train up a child in the way he should go, what are some of those things? How let's not ask the how question yet. Let's just ask, what should we be instilling specifically into young men in that training that's going on there?
Yeah. Well, one thing I think we got to right out of the gate understand is that we're not telling them what to do. You got to make sure you're careful there, that you're not, hey, this is what you should do. This is the only way you should do it. You know, uh, kind of hammering it like you're giving instructions. You're a coach. You only block and tackle this way, and that's not what they want to hear. I think the first thing is I know this isn't really directly a thing that you want to teach them, but the first thing is they're not looking for some skilled presentation that you give them. All this information and stuff. Number one, the first thing is they just want you to be present.
Mhm.
They just want you to be there so they can sit across the table from you. And I've always said it this way: most of these young men that I hang out with, they want to know what I think about what they're thinking, whether it's what they're thinking about in their marriage, as a father, their work, their spiritual life, whatever it may be. I think that attitude we have to go in there with, is that you just need to be present. So when they want to know what you think about what they're thinking, you can give them feedback, and then
Mhm.
you're there to maybe answer some questions around whatever it is they want to talk about. But bottom line is we still need to. There's some foundational truths that these young men need to know and hear. And obviously, with ReUp, we believe that's built around the three truths.
Mhm.
So if you as a man yourself will learn those truths, let the Lord teach and reveal them to you, and they become yours. Again, back to, don't believe what you believe because somebody else believes it. Believe it because you believe it. You've spent time with the Lord, taught you, you've learned it. Then you can pass that on. And so make sure you're doing that, but doing it in a way where it's not like your classroom setting and you're teaching and talking at. You need to be present. You need to be able to respond to when they want to know what you think about what they're thinking. And as you respond to those things, you build those truths in there. You
Mhm.
mix them in there somehow. And it doesn't hurt to, hey, Brandon, while we're sitting here, man, let me pull up Romans 5:1, and it
Mhm.
says here
Mhm.
that we're in our identity, that we're justified by faith,
Mhm.
and what justified really means there in your identity is that, you're 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 a completed work to God. You've been it's in the past tense. All your past, present, and future sins have been forgiven. It's as though you've never sinned before, and that's who you are. And Romans 6:6, you're a new creation. And
Yeah.
so you can mix those things in there, but I don't think they want that. Hey, okay, tell me what to do, and that's why in my new book, towards the back of the chapter, I mean, one of the latter chapters, with the permission from his family, I asked about Bob created a thing called 40 Things We Should Know. He created this. His son was born late in Bob's life, so he created this, that 40 things that he wanted his son to know whenever his son got to a certain age and could start investing in him. Man, if you don't want to buy the book for any other reason, you need to buy it for that. And just, you can skip everything else I wrote if you want to and go straight to that, because that's worth whatever you spend on the book. Because if you want to know what should I try to instill in other young men and men, just take those 40 things there out of the book and just start working through them with me, and give a young man a copy of it, and just sit around and go to lunch with him and talk to him about them. And that'd be a great place to start. And all those things are biblically based. There's scripture to support them, but they're practical things that can literally be passed on from generation to generation, and will help a man of any age really be who God created him to be.
Yeah. It really is interesting to think about that first truth of the man journey, about identity, because so much of the current culture is about identity. And, I think about with my younger, my sons, with all my kids, but specifically thinking about my boys, how much that when you ask them about them, it really is anchored around who they are. With us, with men, so often we're about what do you do, right? But with them, it's a who are you question. And so, they're an athlete, they're a content creator, they're a student, they're a musician. And that's, while there is an element of that's something that they do, it's they communicate it in a way that is much more about who they are as a person. And I think it's interesting you were referencing those passages earlier. Specifically, Paul writes a lot about our identity in Christ. And it's interesting how this first century concept of identity is almost a new thing, even though it's not new, but it's a new thing in the minds of this generation and in the world around us as we see so much influence and so much question around that personal identity of who am I? Who gets to define that? What does that look like for me to live that out? And so it's also helpful to know that kind of shaping and dialogue question allows you to avoid giving you, here's 3 things you need to do or 5 things that you need to do. It really allows that young person to develop that thinking for themselves, for himself, but also speaks to that identity at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So I was listening to you. I think about who would have ever thought that somebody would, what they do when you ask somebody what they do for a living. Now we've got these generations. They've got what's called an influencer.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
that's an actual
Absolutely.
career now. You can
Yeah,
be an influencer,
absolutely.
but that's something you do. But yet it's also defined as a who you are. So
Right.
it's kind of a two-pronged word there now. Influencer is, well, it's something you do, but it's who you are and you get paid for it. And so I sit there and I think about that. I'm like, man, you talk about confusing people now, when we've gotten to a point where you can have a career and define who you are by being an influencer. And no wonder the next generations are so confused.
Mhm.
But it's interesting, Brandon, with your thought process there, if I'm following you right. I can also, when I ask men of any age, hey, what was your problem before you met Jesus? Was it what you were doing or was it who you were? Well, you want to guess what the answer I get 8 out of 10 times is? It's what we were doing. It's
Yeah.
sin. Well,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. Sin wasn't your problem because what you were doing wasn't your problem because even after you met Jesus, you still sinned. So your problem was who you were.
Mm.
But we've confused that so much and kind of thrown both of those in the bucket and stirred it. And when you pour it out, it's just so much confusion now. Okay, is what I do who I am, or is who I am really influence what I do? Well, I'm an influence. I mean, you talking about confusion. So that's why I think just going back to the basic foundational truth in the scriptures that who you were, your identity before you knew Jesus, your problem before you knew Jesus was your identity that was causing you to do the very thing, what you couldn't help. I mean, that was the most natural thing for you to do. But then what got fixed was your identity. And using that statement that we use is of what you do is not who you are, but who you are has a huge impact on what you do.
Mhm.
And boy, if we can just get, because I say all the time, that statement right there, learning that statement from a biblical perspective is the only reason I can sit here with headphones on today and have any kind of sanity, because
Mhm.
that's what changed my life, period, was learning that truth from a biblical perspective that what I do is not who I am, but who I am has a huge impact on what I do if I really know who I am. And that, so again, I mean, we have confused this thing so much, but you go back to that basic thought from a scriptural basis and get men to learn that. The confusion it's amazing how much clearer things become, how the fog kind of lifts and you can see clearly now on the other side, if you want to say it that way. Now, okay, now it makes sense. Now I see it.
Mhm.
Now I know how come the enemy comes at me like he does. When I really know who I am, man, I can understand this battle that's going on to try to get me to do what I don't want to do or get me to believe that's who I am. And no wonder the world's so confused. And so I hate to beat a dead horse, but that statement is such a game changer when
Mhm.
a man learns that from a scriptural basis. But he's got to learn it. He's got to go on a journey of learning that for himself. Just because I said it or you said it or Bob said it or whoever, that's not you got to let the Lord teach you that. And boy, when that happens, it's can't even describe what that does for people's lives. And you've been around ReUp long enough to know, and we get people all the time reaching out to us. Man, that finally makes sense to me.
Mhm.
I finally get it. The light bulb's gone off. I finally understand. Why didn't somebody teach me that 20 years ago or whatever? Because it just
Right.
changes everything.
Yeah.
Changes every.
And so how maybe give some tips. Maybe there's, a dad, a grandfather listening, and this is really resonating with them. Maybe there's a pastor or just someone who's a mentor to a younger man, and they need to be looking for these opportunities to have these kind of discussions. What are some ways that that door opens? And here's an opportunity to make this a bridge to move into a discussion that is more than just what we're dealing with right here. I think about, like, if there's let's just take an athlete, if there's, a failure, then you have an opportunity to have a bigger conversation than just why that ball got through your legs at shortstop, right? Or if we're talking about academics, why you failed the biology test. Here's an opportunity to have a bigger conversation. Those things are important and we want to work on those things because they matter to the team, they matter in the academic world. So we want to deal with those, but there's a bigger conversation to be had. How do we recognize those moments and then take them and move them forward? I'm just a little question there to lay on you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks, Brandon.
You're welcome.
I'm just so reminded of I got asked one time. Bob and I were talking, and he asked me. He said, "When you were playing sports, Um, did anybody ever talk to you, or did you ever think about what if you couldn't play anymore? What what would that look like?" And I really thought about that, and I thought, nobody ever talked to me about that. They just I'm not faulting. I mean, my dad, I love my dad to death. He's one of my heroes. But I don't remember him ever having that conversation with me of, cause I mean, he knew by the time I was 16 years old, my head was shaped like a football and everything in my life revolved around that.
Mhm.
And I'd made up my mind I was going to play college ball. And in my own mind, I thought I could probably do something even further than that, just like every kid thinks, and go to the next level. But I don't remember anybody ever talking to me about, what if you blow your knee out and you never get to play again? Then what? What, what do you, and I remember when I got hurt, sophomore year of college and sitting in the orthopedics uh, room in Lexington, Kentucky, and him telling me that he said, "Tim, you may get hit a thousand more times and nothing ever come of it, but you could get hit one more time and your whole right side could be paralyzed for the rest of your life. So I would recommend you not play anymore." And I mean, all of a sudden that reality of, well, wait a minute. Okay. Now what? Now what do I do? Because where I was getting my identity up until I was 21 years old was just taken away from me. And so, I turned to the fraternity and lived it up and had a big time and made that my identity for a little while until my wife got pregnant while we were dating and we had to get married. So, but I had no plan. I mean, I was drifting along so I think back to that. So to your question, that's a long way to get to this, you know, maybe with your son or somebody else you're investing in or whatever, you pose questions like that. Hey, let me ask you, man. I know you love football. And you're man. I'm excited for you. Maybe you've got a future in it, but have you thought about if you don't or something happens, what's that going to do to you? I mean, do you understand that that's just something you do, and that who you are is really the most important thing? And so, who are you? Who do you think God sees you as? A football
Mhm.
player or his precious child, and what's that really mean? What's that really look like? You know, I just, I think there's ways to, if you're intentional and you want to be intentional and you don't want to just exist and you want to make a difference in people's lives. If you ask the Lord, hey, Lord, help me see situations, give me the right things to say. You that live in me, come out and be that person. I don't know if there's just a recommended way to do it, but
Yeah.
I think just being intentional. And again, if you're a dad and you got sons that are athletes and they just so wrapped up in that, which is okay. I mean, as kids, that's okay, but get them to think beyond that a little bit. Help them say, hey, have you thought about, there's going to come a day that you're not going to be able to play sports anymore. Maybe it's in high school. I mean, you see so many youth today that turn to so many crazy things when they quit playing ball or they get burned out. They don't have an interest anymore. And they go all kinds of different ways. Again, I think it's just being intentional with little things like that. And, the old exercise when you're in elementary school, write a little description of who you are. Your little elementary teacher wants you to do that. And what do you want to do someday or whatever? I think those are conversations that can be had all the way through certain stages of life. Cause I know men today that are not much younger than me that still don't know what they want to do and who they are,
Mhm.
because they
Mhm.
just never been able to really have any clarity there and really understand that. Um, that's why, we named the identity study. Don't you know who you are? I mean,
Mhm.
it's just kind of like, come on, dude, don't you know who you are?
Mhm.
We've got to answer that question. But really, but it's got to be who we are based on who God says we are, not the world.
Yeah. It reminds me of the story of the men that are working in masonry, and a man walks by and he asks the first man, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm stacking bricks." He walks by the second man and asks the man, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm building a wall." And then he goes to the third man, and as he passes by that third man, he asks him, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm building a cathedral." And all three men doing the
Good.
exact same work with very different perspective. And
Yeah,
so I
that's
think kind
good.
of to connect with what you're saying right there, it really is about pulling back and helping young men see the bigger picture. And I think as we look in the Bible, that's what God does, that there's time and time and time again where we have the benefit to see how God was at work in David's life over a long period of time so that he could understand the big picture of what God was doing in his life and who David actually was, you know? And we're just like those people. It's hard, you know? It's another Monday, it's time to get up and to roll out and to go to work, and before you know it, another week has passed, but sooner or later, it's been 2 years or 5 years, and all of a sudden, there's something bigger to see here, and so, yeah, I think we think about that with our children, that all of a sudden, they're starting kindergarten, or all of a sudden, they're getting their driver's license, or all of a sudden, they're, walking that high school graduation line. I think it is helpful for us to pull back and to look at that bigger picture and to ask those bigger questions. The little things do matter. The biology test matters. The ground ball through the legs matters, but asking those big questions like you've talked about of who am I? What's the purpose? What's God's desire for me in my life? And where does my identity come from? And
I had a
we can
young
find
dad.
that.
I had a conversation with a young dad recently. He said he'd gone through the man journey, and he came to me and he said, "Man, I really want to figure out a way to use that in my home." I said, "It's easy. Just start talking about those three truths
Mhm.
with your sons, and be intentional. Okay, what do I really want my sons to know before
Mm,
they leave our house?
that's good.
Well, it's who they are, their identity, how to live by the life of another, Jesus, and how to view life from God's perspective. So just start use that as a framework, and by the time they leave your home, if you feel comfortable that they understand those three truths, then you've done your job, because the Lord will take it from there. So it won't be like Judges 2:10, where it says, "And there arose a generation who did not know God and the work that He had done for the nation of Israel." So there won't be a generation in your home raised up that don't know those three truths. And that's all you can do. As Bob used to tell me, all you can do eventually is just impact their thinking, and just teach them those three truths, and then let them go, turn them loose,
Mhm.
and let the Lord take care of the rest of it. So yeah, I'm not saying that's the answer for everybody, but that's what I challenged that young man with, because he knows those truths now. He's learned them. I said, so the most natural thing for you to do is now just turn around and teach your boys those truths. And you've trained up your kids in the ways of the Lord, which is one of the things we say a biblical man's supposed to do.
Mhm.
But it shouldn't be teaching them how to do stuff in the Lord and work for Him. It should be teaching them truth, and then the truth will impact what they do down the road. So there we
Yeah,
go.
very good. Well, we have a whole platform full
I've
full
got
of
all the answers.
studies.
Yeah, I've got
There
all
you
the
go.
answers for everybody. So yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we're
Good
just
stuff.
on this journey right along with our fellow brothers and sisters, and
Yep.
so trying to
Yep.
trying to live our
No
lives
doubt.
for the glory of God and to help the generation coming behind us to do the same. And that's what ReUp is here to do, is to help men along that pathway. And so we have a platform full of resources. Many of them have been time tested, and we'd love to share them with you. You can find a link there at reuppodcast.com. We'd love for you to share this podcast if it's been helpful to you. We'd love for you to subscribe and let others know so that they can join. And then also make sure to check out Tim's brand new book about the man journey. And what we've talked about today, he deals with in that book. Of course, there's that list of those 40 things to pass on to the next generation that he mentioned earlier. And so make sure to find that resource at reuppodcast.com. Thanks so much for listening to the ReUp Men's Podcast with Tim Brown. I'm Brandon Porter.